Good morning and welcome to the Electoral Area Services Committee of Thursday, June 20th, 2024. It is currently 9:31, and I would like to acknowledge that the Sunshine Coast Regional District is within the territories of the Shishal Nation and Squamish Nations, and I would like to call this meeting to order. Thank you, everybody, for being here, and we have an agenda before us. Would directors like to make any changes to the agenda? I don't see any hands. That makes it easy. So I'll look for a motion to adopt the agenda as presented. That's moved, seconded. All in favor? Perfect. That passes. Rolling right along. We have no presentations or delegations, so we're going to skip right to reports, starting with item number 2. That is Annex A, pages 3 to 14, Development Permit DP 000310 for 1020 Keith Road. And we have staff here to introduce.
Thank you, Chair. I'm happy to briefly introduce a form and character development permit for a Fortis BC gas upgrade facility on Keith Road. And I think the report mainly speaks for itself. This is a form and character for industrial purposes, and happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, staff, and thank you for attachment A. Makes it very clear what the guidelines are and whether or not they were met. Would directors like to discuss, ask questions to staff? Oh, Director McMahon.
Yes, I'd like to move to refer this application to the Area E APC.
And that is seconded. Any further discussion? Director Bax.
Yeah, I was wondering if the form and character can be a little less industrial when it's all finished, said and done.
As in, you want some nice decorations, or?
Well, I noticed that Fortis has a shed on the corner of Roberts Creek Road and Highway 101, and it has a wrap that makes it look like forest. And so I'm not sure what the nature of the neighborhood is, but I was wondering if they were going to do anything to make it look less like 7 sheds.
Well, looking at what they did in Seashell, it doesn't seem like it, but I don't know. Perhaps your APC would have some ideas.
I will ask my APC, but it is on the road to the gravel mine.
Okay.
So it is a somewhat industrial neighborhood, although it has next door to it now an RV park.
Maybe they could wrap it to look like RVs.
Nice one. Okay. All right. So we have a motion on the. Staff.
I would just like to add one consideration just because of the timing on this application. For this, there are some project constraints for Fortis to get this project underway. And if we were to do a referral to the APC, we'd be looking at bringing this back to the board not till probably September at the earliest. So it would be appreciative if we can consider the timelines that we'd be facing on this and the benefit of referring to the APC for this type of development in this area that's been designated essentially for this type of use. Thank you.
Director McMahon.
I'm just going to point out that I have made some suggestions as to how we could compress our timelines for APC referrals, and we haven't gotten anywhere with that. So that's frustrating because of the schedule. I have an APC meeting next week. And it would be nice if we could get that on the agenda faster than like 6 weeks. But at the moment, I do want to refer it. Thank you.
Oh, Director Lee.
I was just wondering if we could ask GM Hall if it would be possible to get it on the APC for next week.
I'll be looking to GM Hall. Any comments?
Thank you for the question, Chair. Staff will, yes. staff will find a way to put it on the agenda with the qualification that it has not yet been considered by the board. And we'll make sure that we'll support our volunteers to do their role, give you their advice, and ensure that good process follows with follow-up with the board directive coming later. Thanks.
Whatever you will decide to do, I guess.
Sorry, clarification, which board directive?
GM Hall.
Thanks. Sorry for being obtuse there, Chair. Staff will we will add the item to the agenda, noting that at this time, we're forwarding it on the, I guess, assumption or knowing that it is scheduled to come to a board meeting for a decision. And should there be a change at that board meeting, then staff would close the loop with the APC. We're also trying to do a better job of reporting back to APCs, and so that report back follows. Thanks.
Does that clarify things, Director McMahon? Perhaps an offline discussion to clarify further. Director Bax.
Yeah, I have a question for Director McMahon. The APC meeting you have scheduled is before our next board meeting?
The APC is this coming Tuesday.
Okay, and so our next board meeting is next Thursday. Is it possible that we could have a decision and a recommendation from the APC in time for our next board meeting and have this item put on our agenda before our summer break?
I would say that's a definite maybe.
I'd like to urge that this actually happens.
I mean, we need to have the minutes and we need to, so I see a shaking of the head over there. GM Hall.
Thank you, Chair. So I believe that the timeline would be such that we could work to have this item come back to a committee meeting before the August break, but not, for clarity, not the next board meeting. As you correctly identify, we would want minutes and we'd want those on an agenda as well. Thanks.
Okay, not yet, Director Bax. Okay, Director Bax, your hand is residual? Residual. Okay, so we do have a motion on the floor, don't we? To refer this to the Area APC. Any further discussion from directors? Oh, Director Lee is thinking hard. Oh yeah, Director Lee?
Perhaps I'm still left wondering if we actually can follow the correct process and get it on a board meeting before our summer break, if it would meet the requirements of allowing our utility to provide the necessary services to the customers. Because I think that's what the question is here.
Question
I
being,
believe I understood that, yes, we can certainly get this on an agenda before the summer break. That's not difficult.
Okay, so does staff have an opinion whether that would meet Fortis's timeline for what they need to do?
go to staff for that, or GM Hall, or?
Through the chair, I can comment that their billing applications are in with the building department, but I'd have to check with their project manager to see on the ongoing timeline on that project. If past the summer break would be a real issue for them, we can certainly bring that information back. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Lee?
If I've got this right, just bear with me. I apologize for being a little slow today. It sounds like we could get this done before the summer break, and I think that is exactly what needs to happen, so I'm quite comfortable. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Excellent. Seeing no further hands, I will call the question. All in favor? of referring to APC? Great. Any opposed? No? Awesome, that passes. Forgot to ask for a motion to receive all reports. That's moved. Can I get a seconder for receipt of all reports? Yeah, seconded. All in favor? Great, so all reports have been received. Beautiful. So moving on to item 3, which is Annex B, pages 15 to 28. I'll give you time to get to it. It's a development variance permit DVP 00099 for 7531 Cove Beach Road, and that is in Area B. And I have Planner Copes here to introduce this item.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this development variance permit application is to vary the following. The setback from the natural boundary of the ocean from 15 meters to 7.5 meters, which would allow for the construction of a swimming pool. In addition, to also vary the maximum allowable parcel coverage from 15% to 20.5%, which would allow for the construction of the pool and an auxiliary dwelling unit, which is in addition to the single unit dwelling which is currently under construction on the parcel. The setback variance is required due in part to recent changes to the zoning bylaw which increase setbacks from the natural boundaries from 7.5 to 15 meters. Also, the fact that a swimming pool is considered a structure and is therefore subject to the parcel coverage requirements. The request for the lot coverage variance is a result of the design of the single unit dwelling, which has a large floor plate which is stepped up along the hillside with very large overhangs. Also, the request to build an auxiliary dwelling unit on the property and a swimming pool, noting that the pool is considered a structure and counts towards lot coverage as well. Notifications were mailed to neighboring properties and comments related to the proposal are attached to the report. Staff have evaluated the proposal based on the board's DVP policy and recommend issuance of the permit. Staff are happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, staff. And now I will read this beautiful spiel. Having heard staff's introduction of the proposed development variance permit, if there is anyone in the webinar audience or in the boardroom wishing to speak to the application, we ask that you raise your hand. If attending virtually, please use the raise hand tool or *6, and I will unmute you in the order of hands raised. When you speak, please give your full name, and if you wish, your address for the record. In order to keep our meeting moving, we ask that you please keep your comments focused and limit them to 3 minutes. Once the committee has heard from all those wishing to speak, we will proceed with a motion and discussion toward a recommendation to the board. So, I will then ask, anyone in the gallery wishing to speak? No? And I see someone who is Director Bax. So no one in the virtual gallery either. All right, so we will move to discussion. So Director Bax.
Yeah, so looking over this application, and I received an email this morning from someone who was opposed to this, and their reasoning was quite sound. We want to be very careful that we're not precedent setting. I'm curious as to the existing deck was a structure that was approved for construction by the regional district. And so with that in mind, that there's already existing structure so that there's no further encroachment on the setback other than that what is already there. I think I would have to approve this this development variance. But but would the circumstances be different? I would oppose it. If there was, if it was just a variance for a pool if there was no existing structure there already, I could not support this kind of variance. But as the circumstances that I understand, I would have to say it really doesn't make much of a difference right now.
Right. So I guess the difference is that the plaza is not considered a structure, but a pool is. Okay, so I see what you mean. The plaza is already designed to be there, so whether it's a plaza or a pool, okay, great. Director McMahon.
I'm just wondering, given that this has attracted the attention of the Half Moon Bay Community Association, whether the director would want to refer it to APC or not.
That was my intention, yes. So I guess I will make a motion while we're at it. That development variance permit DVP 00099, 7531 Cove Beach Road, be referred to the Area B APC. You can fill in all the parts that I missed, yeah. Great. Oh, and there were 2 seconders apparently, so beautiful. It's on the floor. Director Lee.
Thank you, Chair. This is quite a complicated one, and I'm sure happy that it's going to the APC for comments. I do notice, I had a question though, just for clarity. The zoning was changed to allow for a subdivision, but it wasn't changed to the more common zoning type. I was wondering why that would have occurred, if there is an answer.
Would staff like to take a, yeah, thank you.
Yes, thank you for the question. While I am not super familiar with the history of the original rezoning application, our research does indicate that the subdivision district was changed. However, the RU1, which is the rural residential zoning, was not changed. If a similar application were to come in now, we would certainly recommend a more residential zoning. However, for whatever reason, that did not occur at that time.
Great, so it shall remain a mystery for now. Director McMahon.
This is strictly a curiosity question, but the house has a very unusual roof. Is there a reason for this very unusual roof design that you're aware of?
Nice, thank you for the question. While I'm not 100% sure of the exact rationale, I do believe that it is part of the architectural design of the home. I do believe that it also contributes to helping with the heating and the cooling of the home as well. I believe the architect had mentioned something of that nature.
Great. Thank you very much for that. I do want to note that great to see that the neighbors are not opposed. That's always nice to see. But yes, there have been some concerns in the community at large. So I think sending it to the APC for further comments and input is good. I'm wondering though, as per the previous item, is there a timeline or is there like, will this slight delay have an impact, a negative impact on this file?
Thank you for the question. I think this one is probably slightly different to the other one in that for a development variance permit, we do need to do notifications. So in order to bring the report back again for consideration, we'd have to re-notify. So I think, sorry, we wouldn't have to re-notify?
I don't think so, no.
I guess it might depend on what happens at the APC. Like if there's additional changes to the project, which result in changes to the variance, I think we may well have to re-notify neighbors in terms of how the variance may be changing. So it might depend what happens at the APC, I think, in terms of whether we need to re-notify, but possibly it would be September that this one would come back as a result.
Okay, thanks. And I saw GM Hall there with his hand up.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to add to what the assistant manager was saying, to say that we always prioritize good process, and we, of course, respect the board's decision if they decide to refer it to get more local knowledge and perspective through APC. A key difference here is this isn't part of a utility system where there are planned upgrades and that kind of thing. So a little different scenario. Thanks.
Yes, they seem like different proposals there, different shape structures. Great. I do have a question for staff. I don't see any more hands, so I'll go for it. I think it would be worthwhile to give this a little bit of context for staff to remind us why the setback was increased from 7.5 to 15. What was the purpose of that? Just because it's in the conversations, and just to remind us, give us a refresher would be great. Whoever wants to take this on.
Sure, I can provide some brief comment on that. For zoning bylaw 722, which was adopted in October of 2022, I believe, the ocean setback was increased from 7.5 to 15 meters for the electoral areas, excluding electoral area A, of course. The 15-meter setback is generally considered to be good practice. It is generally the provincial standard. So it's in the provincial guidelines for flood setbacks. It's used by a lot of other municipalities as well as jurisdictions outside of British Columbia.
And just to follow up, if I may, and this coming from the province, I'm assuming it has something to do with sea level rise. Any other considerations there?
I'm not 100% familiar with the reasoning of the provincial guidelines. However, I do know that sea level rise obviously is a consideration that the province is putting in their guidelines. There may also be environmental factors, habitat protection, that may be more for lakes and streams, for example. But generally, 15 meters is standard for most flooding for a variety of reasons.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Director Lee.
It's probably not the place and time, but I'm going to give it a run anyways. In the case of ocean rise, there's multiple factors that drive ocean rise, including if the property is exposed to wind and storm surge, they call it. And so if you're in a protected bay, it is common to relax the setback. And if you're in an open area like my house, you'd be expected to have a higher because you're open to the storm and the storm surge. But I thought the 7.5 was the recommendation, which I think is another part of the discussion. But in a lot of applications I've been part of, qualified professional will very often vary that because it's dependent on the topography and good run the storm could take up. If it's all flat, you need further back. If it's really steep, you can be closer. So those are all things. So it's kind of a loaded question. I'm not sure. I guess it's something we're going to be looking at a hearing shortly. My question was, has it ever become provincial legislation enforceable by a court other than our bylaw, which is exactly that? But I was thinking about provincial legislation, such as a federal setback from a fish-bearing creek. I don't know if anybody's prepared to answer that one.
Maybe then.
I can have a go at answering that.
How about it?
Are you talking more about creeks or just general oceanfront in relation to storm?
I'm quite comfortable with creeks are a federal requirement, but an oceanfront was my question in this case.
I believe the guidelines that Mr. Copes was talking to was more focused on guidelines as opposed to a specific regulation. I think the fact that you have the 15 meters then obviously requires professional reports to look at it, as you alluded to, in order to determine if a lesser setback is appropriate. I think in terms of this particular application, like we have a certain nuance kind of in the zoning bylaw at the moment, which as was discussed, allows for a plaza within that area. but wouldn't allow for a building or structure within that area. So that's where, as we're part of our updates to development permit area guidelines, which this area would also be subject to, we'd look to kind of address these things. So we're trying to capture it through the development permit aspects as well, in terms of determining whether a development's safe in the location proposed.
Director Bax.
So, I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name.
It's Kevin Jones.
Kevin Jones. Thank you. And what Mr. Jones said was that the plaza was allowed, but it was, I believe that the setback was increased through bylaw through OCP to match with the setbacks that we have in Roberts Creek from 7.5 meters to 15 meters. Now, was the plaza built when the setback was 7.5 meters, and then the setback changed? Is that what happened?
Right, I think I don't know if the plaza has already been built, but okay. But having it not been, be considered a structure makes it a bit of a difference. But if staff wants to speak to that, I'd welcome the comments.
That is correct. The plaza is currently under construction, but the plaza doesn't require a building permit, so they are allowed to build that in that location. But because the swimming pool is considered a structure, they need a building permit for it, and therefore it's subject to the zoning bylaw setbacks.
Oh, okay, so I was under the impression that the plaza was an existing structure. It's under construction, you say? And so they're changing they're changing the plan to fit what they've already started. All right, so I don't like the look of that. If it was an existing thing that was built under the 7.5 meter setback, I would have no issue. But Sherry?
Sorry, corporate officer, your hand is up.
Thank you, Chair. So just a reminder that there is a motion on the floor to refer this to APCs. So I would suggest while that motion is on the floor, we may not continue to debate the application.
That is fair. Let's debate the motion on the floor. So the motion is to refer this to the Area B APC. Any further question, comments about that motion? Thank you, corporate officer, for setting us on the right path. I will then call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? That passes. So thank you very much, staff and participants. Okay, we are moving on to item number 4. That is Annex C, pages 29 to 34, Agricultural Land Commission application ALR 00026, 437 Huff Road. That is voting all. And, Planner Copes, if you'd like to introduce.
Yes, thank you, Chair. SCRD received this referral from the Agricultural Land Commission, ALC, regarding an application seeking the placement of fill on a 2.1 hectare parcel in Electoral Area E, Elphinstone at 437 Huff Road. The purpose of the application is to place fill on the property in order to improve soil quality and therefore agricultural potential. Staff have evaluated this application based on conformance with Sunshine Coast Regional District Agricultural Area Plan, the Elphinstone Fisher Community Plan, and Zoning Bylaw 722. Given the information provided in this application, along with the applicant's desire to make improvements to the property's current condition, staff recommends supporting this proposal and forwarding to the ALC for their review and decision.
Thank you, staff. Director McMahon.
As we are already sending something to the Area E APC, I would also like to move that we refer this as well to the Area E APC. I see a seconder. I just wanted to comment that the neighbors very much appreciate the new ownership of this property, given its rocky history. and are appreciative that the area is being cleaned up, but I would still like to refer it to my APC. Thank you.
So we have a motion on the floor to refer this to the Area EAPC. Oh, that's already been seconded. On the floor already, yeah. Way ahead of you. Okay, so no further questions or comments. So I will then call the question. All in favor? All right, that passes. Easy peasy. Okay, so moving on, number 5. Annex D, pages 35 to 38. SCRD agreement with Sunshine Coast Community Forest for stewardship and maintenance of Big Tree Recreation Site. I have Manager Huntington here to introduce this item.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning. The purpose of this staff report is to seek support for the SCRD and the Sunshine Coast Community Forest to enter into a partnership agreement for the stewardship and maintenance of Big Tree Recreation Site. SCRD Park Services values and appreciates the support of our partner groups and organizations for stewardship and maintenance of lands within the SCRD Park system. Relationships such as these improve the services offered and help engage the community in our parks in active and meaningful ways. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Manager Huntington. All right, directors, any discussion, question, motion? Director McMahon.
Sure, this seems like a great agreement, and so I would be happy to move the recommendations on page 35.
Well, I see a couple of seconders for that. Perfect. Any further discussion on this motion? All right. Well, I think it's great to have partnerships. I think that's part of our strategic plan. That's one of the things that we, I believe it's our vision or mission, one of them, innovative partnerships, and I think that's wonderful and gets, it lightens the load a little bit for staff, which is very, very busy. So yeah, I'll call the question. All in favor? Beautiful, that passes. Okay, thank you, staff. And moving on to number 6. Annex E, pages 39 to 41. These are the minutes for Electoral Area F Advisory Planning Commission meeting. Any comments, observations, questions from directors? There is a recommendation in here, but I think that was, yeah. Great. And Director Stanford unfortunately couldn't be here today. But directors, any comments, questions? I don't see any hands, so that's already been accepted, so we're good. Okay, if everybody's okay, we're going to move on to the next item. Yeah, item number 7. That's Annex F, pages 42 to 52. That is the 2024 Electoral Areas Grant and Aid Debrief. So this one is going to be in a couple of parts. So we have a report in the open portion. We're going to start with that. If staff would like to introduce the open portion, and then we'll go in camera when we decide to do that. Great.
Thank you, Chair. So this particular report is in front of you as we've just concluded our electoral areas grant and aid process, and we presented the awards at the end of May. So typically what happens is we present a report for discussion after that particular process to review our policy, ensure alignment with legislation, and see if there's any recommended changes to the process. So in front of you here is some information. Part of it has been presented before for the committee's consideration and open for discussion and questions. Thank you.
Okay. So we can have a discussion now. So I'll kind of leave it to directors to decide whether or not you would prefer to go in camera right away, or if you'd like to have a bit of a general discussion prior. Director McMahon?
What the hell? What the heck? I'm sorry, I'm online this morning. My feeling about the policy is that perhaps we could re-examine what it is that we are looking for when we give out grants and aid. The policy seems to be very prescriptive in what people shouldn't do, but if we are a little more directive in terms of what sorts of things that we like to fund, I think it might be helpful. So I sent around some bullet point suggestions for directors to take a look at. The suggestions I had were 4 items, and if any of these fall under things that we can't do, that's fine. We'll work that out. But first one was festivals and arts and culture events primarily benefiting local residents. And that was specifically because tourism has, other funding. Second bullet, activities that foster neighborliness and neighborhood resilience. Third bullet, my phrase, boots on the ground environmental and citizen science initiatives. And that would cover things like invasive plant removal, things like that. And then the fourth bullet, innovative solutions to grassroots problems that are not currently addressed by government or other organizations. And I thought we could have that as a discussion point. And not necessarily dig into the weeds of a lot of things that we're not necessarily in a position to evaluate. Some of the policies, some of the things in the existing policy is things like capacity to deliver, ability to demonstrate or anticipate future outcomes. That's a bit difficult, especially for these small projects, especially like the $500 ones. I really think that it's a lot to ask. So I'm wondering if we could start by outlining the sorts of things we're looking at, then get to the things that we will not approve, a number of which we can't for legal reasons. I don't know. I'll stop there and see what other directors have to say.
Yeah, thank you, Director McMahon, for these bullet points. I think they're great. And I have Director Lee queued up.
Thank you, Chair. My comments are kind of general in that I've been very happy we've been able to fulfill these requests. And I think that the community has come to rely upon them. And we've had the same discussion every year. So we've unwittingly put our staff in a difficult position. And I agree with the comments we just heard about things that we like to fund. And so I think our task is to figure out how to do it. But I'm really concerned about spending a lot of time on this because they're small dollar amounts and we spend days. So doing it. But it's got great benefit to my community, and they actually look quite forward to it. And it's had very positive effects on my community along the lines of exactly what Director McMahon mentioned. So I think we need to figure it out somehow. How and when, I'm not sure. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Lee. Director McMahon, is your hand up again, or residual? Yeah. I seem to remember that most of the issues that we had were with organizations coming year after year for funding. So that's one of the big points, I guess, that we could decide whether or not we want to change the policy so that's acceptable, so that's, in line with our policy. And the other one I seem to remember was wages and, sorry, not wages, like artist fee, speaker's fee, that remuneration that is not, I guess, would not be considered wages. So I seem to remember like that's what we kept bumping against. And I wonder if like by addressing those two, we would make life a little easier for staff. But Director Bax, I see your hand up.
Yeah, as Director Lee says, the benefit to our communities and the goodwill that these things create is unmeasurable. It's really a great way for our communities to get a little bit of seed money to do the things that they want. And if our policy doesn't fit the way that we have been dispersing these funds, then maybe we need to change the policy. Now, I'm not a policy writer. I don't know how we would go about doing that. But as you said, as the chair mentioned, that if the rules don't fit what we've been doing, then we need to change the rules. And so I don't know what form that would take.
Thank you, Director Bax. Would staff have any comments as to how, like what the process would be for the board to change its policy? Yeah, Acting CAO?
I think that some of the observations that staff have made is it's not necessarily having clarification for the policy and what the board's looking for would be really helpful. And that might be an amendment to the policy, but it might be just something in the application, types of things that you're looking for, and giving applicants some idea of what will be assessed as part of their application. So that's helpful information and good communication back to the community groups. I think one of the things we've observed throughout the electoral areas grant and aid process for several years now, and it's identified in the staff report, is that the concern is the alignment or misalignment with Local Government Act, and that when we continue to fund the same organization over and over again, especially for the same types of activities, not theoretically, per the legislation, you should be establishing a service for that. So some of the types of things or activities that you're doing, if it's broad, if you changed your policy, you still wouldn't actually be compliant with the legislation. So your policy change wouldn't actually fix the problem that you're trying to solve. So the pickle is that theoretically, in some instances with some of these groups, you may want to establish services for these types of activities if you want to continue to fund those types of things. In our staff assessment over the years, we've also taken a look at what other regional districts do and how they have addressed these types of things. And most certainly policies look very similar amongst regional districts. And the last time we did a holistic review, we actually collaborated with the other regional districts on what they were doing. And we were all quite similar. The difference was that some of the regional district and larger ones had actually established services for the types of things that you're talking about, which is culture, community events, those types of things. The regional district actually contemplated establishing a service a few years back, as you know, to address and fund social services, but was determined that wasn't a priority of the board. So I think that's the struggle, is it's not necessarily always policy, it's more of a legislative barrier, so.
Great, and if I can just jump in just to follow up with these comments. For us, a couple of directors who were not on the board last term, would you be able to give us the broad strokes why that service, why the board decided not to, or I guess directors can also answer, but like,
It was a decision of this board.
Right.
When you were first elected.
Oh, that's the way back when.
Yeah, it was when you first elected and when you were trying to determine your priorities and all the things that were on the docket. That was one of the items that was felt that wasn't a priority at this particular time. So we do continue to fund some of those particular programs till we find a way, because I think the recognition is that we acknowledge that there's some misalignment, but we want to ensure that we communicate with groups and find a path forward, or at least communicate a different path if the board so chooses.
Well, thanks for that walk through down memory lane. Great. Who's next? Director McMahon.
Yeah, I'd further note a couple of things. One is that pretty much all the social services that we either fund or have come to us looking for funding are things that have been downloaded from senior government, which is, not personally where I think we should be going. There is a huge amount of need in the community, but we already have, I don't know how many services. I hear different numbers, but somewhere around 75 maybe. And the cost, there is a certain amount of cost to establishing and maintaining a service. And for something that's we're only paying out $5,000 a year, it seems just like, would we need a service for the higgledy-piggledy parade? If we could go further into the past, but I was just interested in item 7.2, gives all the things that we will not approve grant and aid for. And some of them make perfect sense to me, like 7.2.1, large capital costs for equipment or improvements to privately owned properties. Number 5, personal benefit. Number 6, religious organizations, etc. But some of them have become problematic. And I would flag 2 of them. One is number 2, which is fire suppression and life or emergency safety equipment, which has come up with the island residents all the time. And 7.2.4, which is remuneration, which includes other fees. For some reason, I thought we had taken that out in a previous revision of this policy. But the reality of nonprofit organizations these days is that there just aren't so many volunteers around, and it's not always fair or equitable to expect people not to be remunerated. And as an example, if a musician is playing at Slow Sundays in the Creek, they shouldn't have to do that for free. They should have some amount of remuneration for the services that they're offering. And artists in particular are often asked to do things for free when it's, in fact, their profession. So I know the intent there is that we are not going to pay annual wages of staff, but the application of it has become problematic. I don't know if wording would address that or what, but I'd be very interested anyway in staff's comment on some of these items and why they are there.
Acting CAO.
At the last review, there were, and there are, or have been, substantive considerations to those in the past, and there are some even legal opinions on some of those, and as far as what some of the considerations for the SCRD needs to be, and hence why they're in the policy.
Director Lee.
Thank you, Chair. I know we now are into kind of changing a policy on the fly here. And I'm not sure if we need to change a policy. So the report was for our information, which I thought was a pretty good reason for the report. I think we can safely read it, take it away, chat, and if we do decide that we need to update the policy sometime in the future, we have time between now and next year. We could simply bring a motion forward and review it again at that time. I personally don't have an appetite to do that right now. hopefully I'd find some time between now and when it needs to go on a work plan. Or maybe ask if we could jam it in somewhere when in a quiet time between now and then. I'm perfectly prepared to continue my inappropriate behavior for next year if necessary. So I don't have a burning desire to interrupt some very high-profile projects we got. So I would suggest we just accept that it was for information and move on.
Okay, thank you. I see acting CEO's got her hand up.
Just to note that the board has a policy review committee. It's coming up in July, but that's a standing committee. And if there was any desire in the future to reference or refer this to that policy discussion after some consideration with some broad direction as far as certain types of framework the board would like to see, then that would be completely appropriate. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Director McMahon.
Yes, well, referring it to the policy committee is probably the best way to go. Do we ever have a couple of directors sit down and take an initial kick at, rather than try to do this in a meeting on the fly, is there a way to set up a task group to take a look at one or two policies and then bring something forward that then staff could review to see that it was, appropriate and move it that way, right? Because trying to go item by item through these things in a committee meeting is really tough.
I see corporate officer thinking. My question is, would that be our call? Would that be the board's call to strike such committee? Just gonna. There's some buffering going on. Oh, Director Lee.
I kind of think that the policy review committee could deal with that one for us. As long as we get it there, they're a committee, they can decide, what they want to do. If they want to have some volunteer people help write a policy, why not? Doesn't even have to be the board. It's only suggestions at that point.
Corporate officer?
I could make a couple of suggestions. So we could refer this to committee, and this committee could give us some direction to explore a certain direction or a certain option within the policy. Alternatively, the members of the Board Policy Review Committee are free to do their homework, so to speak, before that committee meeting and come forward to the public meeting to discuss changes they would like to see to the policy at that meeting. So would that meet the board's need without having to actually establish a formal committee?
I think sounds like a fair and practical idea. But Director McMahon.
Yes, could the corporate officer remind me who's on the policy review committee? I have this sinking feeling it's me.
It's chaired by Director Stanford. I believe you are on it. I believe Director Bax is on it. Or Director Toth.
Also wanted to know whether we have quorum on that committee or not.
While this is, while staff is looking for an answer to that question, process question, does there have to be a motion to refer this particular policy to this policy review committee, or does it automatically go there?
I think that a motion would be the best avenue to refer that.
Thank you very much. Director McMahon.
I would suggest that we consider that motion after we've done the in-camera portion.
Corporate Officer.
I can confirm the committee members. So Director Stanford chairs that committee, Director McMahon vice chairs, and members are Director Bax, Director Toth, and Director Gabius.
So quorum. Yes. Would directors like to move in camera at this point? Yeah. Could I get a motion that the public be excluded from attendance at the meeting in accordance with section 91A and K of the community charter? That's seconded. I'll call the question. All in favor? Great. Question, should we take question from the gallery now? Yeah, okay. So let's see, do we have anyone here? We have Connie and, I believe you're alternate director Hardy. So if any of the folks in the virtual gallery would like to ask questions, now would be the time. I do not see any hands. So then we will be moving in camera. Okay. We'll take a little 5-minute recess first. Welcome back to the Electoral Area Services Committee meeting of June 20th, 2024. We are now back in the open session. Would directors like to keep talking about our grant and aid review, or are we happy with where things are at? Okay, I don't see any hands. So I will then look for a motion to adjourn this meeting. Good. Moved, seconded. All in favor? And we are adjourned. And I do not see any attendees, so we are good. Awesome. Thank you.